Welcome to the Tudor Dixon Podcast. I have Tom Wolfe with me today. I think his story is very interesting considering what we're seeing across the country right now. If you're not aware, we have a pretty severe homeless epidemic in a lot of our big cities. This is a serious problem in many of the cities in the state of Michigan, but I know we see it in California, we see it in DC, we see it in New York. I think we have about 250,000 people in the United States right now that are in this situation, that are homeless. Tom Wolfe is formerly homeless, also a recovering heroin and fentanyl addict from San Francisco. He's been clean and sober for 7 years now. Your story, Tom, is pretty wild. I mean, I think it's the same story that so many people know. You had surgery, right? And then ended up as an addict.
That's right. And Tudor, it's great to be here. And I don't mean to correct you right out of the gate, but it's 750,000 people experiencing homelessness on any given day.
750,000.
Yeah, it's a much bigger problem than people seem to understand. And
So
it's
$750,000.
Yeah, $750,000. And it's really manifested out here on the West Coast. But yeah, I have a pretty wild story of falling into addiction and then homelessness and then finding recovery. I, first of all, want to preface it by saying I'm a regular guy. I'm just a regular middle-class guy, married with 2 kids, living in a suburb of San Francisco. And back in early 2015, when I was working for the city and county of San Francisco, I had to have surgery on my foot to repair an old injury where they had to break my foot and reset it and put 2 titanium screws in my foot to kind of stabilize it. And they sent me home with a 30-day supply of oxycodone for the pain. And I didn't use those pills as directed, so to speak. 1 pill every 4 to 6 hours wasn't cutting it. So I started using 2 pills. And I still remember the day where I took 3 pills or 30 milligrams all at once. And that's when I kind of crossed this threshold into being high, so to speak, where all my problems melted away. It wasn't just the pain, but any marital problems or financial problems. I had small kids in the home. All those stresses kind of went away for a few hours. And I absolutely loved that feeling. I loved it. It was like someone putting a warm blanket over you, where you just felt kind of safe and happy. And that's the hook. That's the hook with opioids. That's why so many people fall prey to that addiction, is they want that feeling. And so over the next, 18 months, I continued to use. Obviously, when I couldn't get more pills from my doctor, I went to the street. I started purchasing pills on the street, and in 2015, you could find a variety of different opioids on the street in San Francisco, and my addiction increased or grew until I was taking 560 milligrams a day.
But I mean, how does that I feel like this is the part that if you haven't had this happen, you don't understand. Had you ever taken any drug before? Had you ever had alcohol problems? Were there any other addiction problems in your past?
Well, not in my past, but in my family. So
Okay.
Alcoholism runs in my family. I have 2 siblings that are in recovery from alcoholism, and my dad was a drinker. So I think it's kind of genetic. Like I had the predisposition for addiction. It's just that mine manifested with opioids instead of alcohol. And, the big thing here is that when I couldn't get more pills from my doctor, I was going into what they call withdrawal. I was getting dope sick, right? I wanted more. I was having anxiety. I was feeling the physical effects of starting to run out of these pills.
Did you know that? I mean, at that point, do you go, man, I think I have a real serious problem? I mean, what is that transition like? Because you go from being a pillar of society, really. People think of you as this amazing man. You have a wife, you have 2 kids, you work for the city, you're doing great work for the city, like you're doing God's work for the city, and you are suddenly in a situation where I assume you had no idea that would have that predisposition. Even when you see your family members have a problem with alcohol, you don't immediately connect that if I have a surgery, I'm in danger.
Right.
So this seems like it happened pretty fast for you to suddenly have this complete personality change.
Yeah, and that's the power of addiction, right? So it's kind of like, it's hard to explain. The only thing I can tell you is that, there was a moment where I admitted to myself that, you know what, I'm just going to be addicted. I can manage this. I can handle it. And I think that's the other big trick in addiction for people, is that they think that they can manage their addiction. They think that they can still function at a high level with their addiction. They start rationalizing. that it's okay if these things fall by the wayside. It's okay if I pay that bill late. It's okay if maybe I don't pay my mortgage this month and use that money for drugs. It's okay if I miss that pickup of my kids at school or I'm late because I have to go get my drugs first. You begin prioritizing those drugs over everything else.
So I was reading your story and I read this part where you explained, I think this was in 2019, you were explaining this, that you would go out to this, you would say you're going out to the store and go to this terrible area
Yep.
and go pick up drugs. And I was thinking to myself, man, if that happened in my house and suddenly my husband's just gone, and I imagine it's not a quick trip to go pick up drugs, disappear. What is happening at home? Are there tensions? Is your wife catching on? Does she not know? What is happening?
Yeah, those are great questions. And the answer is, yeah, she's catching on. But I'll also say that denial and codependency are very powerful things for
Mm,
partners of people or family members of people that are struggling with addiction. She didn't want to believe it, right? She didn't want to believe that her husband of 20 years uh, and the father of her kids was basically turning into a full-blown drug addict, later on heroin addict and fentanyl addict. But it just goes to show you that addiction itself does not discriminate. It can get
yeah.
anybody, rich, poor, black, white, it doesn't matter. Addiction doesn't care. If you have that predisposition or if there are circumstances in your life that kind of lead you to self-medicate, you can absolutely become addicted and it will tear your life apart.
So in the first Trump administration, I will say I also had surgery in 2015. Was yours in 2015 also?
That's right.
So I had surgery in 2015. I had a double mastectomy. I had breast cancer, so I had the double mastectomy, and I came home with a massive amount of drugs. I mean, I cannot even tell you. It was ridiculous. Never would have used them. I I used them for like 3 days, and then you have all of these medications that you may never use again, or I do understand how you could get addicted to them because there were way more than I needed. I'll say that for the pain that I had, it was a 3-day event for me, and then I never needed those again. I had to go back for a surgery in 2019, so this is well into the Trump administration, and the amount of medication that I came home with was a few extra strength Advil. You get like the 800 milligram Advil.
Right.
It was a striking difference. Do you think, and my understanding is that within that time, those first few years of the first Trump administration, there was a real push to say we're going to limit the amount of opioids that go home with people after surgeries like this.
Yeah. So look, this entire crisis, the fentanyl crisis, everything that we're talking about now, all the groundwork for that, look, I hate to say it, but it's true, was laid out by Big Pharma. Okay. And the overprescription of OxyContin back in the 1990s. You had pain clinics, you had doctors writing prescriptions for hundreds of pills. I interviewed a guy that's been clean now for about 9 or 10 years. He used to go to pain clinics and he would get 80 milligram OxyContin tablets just on a whim because his back hurt. Like, that's the kind of foundation that was laid where 20 million people got addicted to opioids across the country, especially in the Rust Belt in the 1980s and 90s. And it's kind of just progressed now because, of course, our government is a few years behind on actually addressing the drug policies in this country. So, yes, we restricted those opioids, which is good. But at the same time, the cartels were figuring out how to synthesize or make synthetic opioids, i.e. fentanyl. And then they started making it in mass quantities and pumping it into this country to a population that was already very vulnerable as a result of Big Pharma laying that kind of foundation for the addiction and opioid crisis in our country. And now you're kind of seeing it play out. Last year, we had nearly 90,000 drug overdose deaths in this country. And to just give you context, in the year 2000, we only had 17,000 overdose deaths in this country. So
Whoa,
the
that's
arrival of fentanyl,
crazy.
yeah, it has completely changed the game, and it requires us to change our response.
Stick around. We've got more coming up with Tom Wolf. But if you are over 50, you want to stay here right now and listen to this, especially if you are worried about your heart health, because we now have a 16-year study of over 30,000 people that have found an answer, and that is nattokinase. It's an ancient Japanese superfood that will help reduce your risk of heart attack and improve your cardiovascular health. Japan is already on this. They have the world's second longest life expectancy, and it's because of this. They've used this powerful natural enzyme for thousands of years. Luma Nutrition has perfected their own powerful nattokinase formula, and it's made right here in the USA and third-party tested for purity and quality. You should buy your supplements from a source you can trust, and Luma Nutrition was founded by a former U.S. Army officer. They're on a mission to provide the highest quality natural supplements made right here in the USA. So today you can try nattokinase for up to 40% off when you visit lumanutrition.com. It's LUMA nutrition.com. lumanutrition.com, veteran owned and proudly made right here in the USA. Check it out today. Now stick around. We've got more after this. What's your reaction to what you're seeing right now with the Trump administration going out and taking out these boats that are headed for the United States with drugs? I mean, I think it's very controversial, but it is sending a very strong message to anybody who's trying to bring deadly drugs into this country.
I have no issue because I'm sorry, I don't. Because look, when I was on the street, I used to hold drugs for the drug dealers out here. I was a mule for them because they would pay me with heroin. That's how I was able to support my addiction. Ugh. So I talked to these guys. I knew what they were.
That's actually an interesting point that you're making that I think we don't think about, because you go, oh my gosh, there's all these bad guys on the street selling drugs, but you were sucked into being one of their lackeys because you're getting the product and they get you addicted. And here's this upstanding citizen, dad of two, great husband, who in just a matter of 4 years fell to this level.
Yep, that's right. And that speaks to the power of addiction, the desperation of addiction. I mean, I was on the street. I had been cut off from everything. My family was practicing what they call separation with love. So, they love me. They want me to do okay, but they're not going to come out and help me and give me money on the street to just buy drugs. So I had to figure out my hustle. And I want to be clear, in San Francisco, as an example, we have 500 to 1,000 organized drug dealers operating in plain sight in broad daylight in the city. Okay. And it's been that way for at least a decade, if not longer. And they're fueled by the Sinaloa cartel. Right. And so there's that whole network of cartel drug dealers up and down the west coast of the United States, from San Diego all the way to Anchorage, Alaska, and over into Salt Lake City and Denver, et cetera, selling drugs that are killing our kids, that are destabilizing our large urban centers, our big cities. It's destabilizing them. If you ever read Michael Schellenberger's book, San Francisco, he really laid that out very clear as part of his argument as to why these cities are falling apart. It's being fueled by drugs. It's being fueled by organized drug dealers. So for Trump to crack down on that, I think it's long overdue. And I know it makes a lot of people uncomfortable, and I'm probably going to get some heat because I'm out here in San Francisco, so I'm going to get some heat for saying that. But you know what? Interdiction, reducing the supply of drugs is just as important as reducing the demand for drugs. We need to make it harder for people to get high and easier for people to access treatment and get off of those drugs.
So there was a particular police officer, I believe, that kept kind of giving you a push to get off the streets. Your wife, he had talked to your wife, and there was kind of I mean, from my perspective, this is like a God thing. He talks to your wife. He has this connection to you in a more personal way. And I thought it was interesting the way he described it. He was like, there's not that many people once they're at this point who have a wife who's still going, I miss him. I can't stand that he's gone. We love him, and really still searching for that person to return. And that struck him. So I feel like he was almost like a guardian angel for a while from the story I read. But tell us a little bit about that process of him following you and you getting out of that situation.
Yeah, that's so first of all, my wife is a saint. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making amends to her. And I'm very, very happy to do that. And I'm happy to also say that I'm reconciled with my wife and kids. And that couldn't have happened without recovery, without finding our faith as a family and making a decision to move forward together. What Officer Rob Gilson did for me was above and beyond the call of duty. So my wife had actually called the Tenderloin police station in tears, in a panic, to file a missing persons report on me because I had been gone from the home for 11 days.
Mm.
And he took that phone call. And it's interesting. I was arrested 6 times after that on the streets, for various crimes I was committing as a result of my addiction, which I own all of them completely. And I paid my debt. I had to go to jail. I had to be on probation. I had to do all those things. Um, but he arrested me 4 out of those 6 times. And the last time he arrested me, as I was being booked into jail, he just looked at me and he said, "Dude, you're skinny, you're dirty. I know you have a wife and kids at home that love you. You need to get yourself clean and you need to get back to your family." And for whatever reason, that last time that he said that to me, it really hit home, because then I realized the damage that I had caused, not just to myself, but to my wife and to my kids. And it gave me it gave me like an opportunity to start thinking. And then I had to go sit in jail and think about it for another 3 months after that, before I just really decided that I was going to give recovery an honest try. And I give a lot of credit to the Salvation Army. I have to, because they're the ones that took me in and gave me a chance to go through their rehab program. That was a 6-month residential program that was free. They didn't have to do that, but they took me in and gave me a chance. And I found recovery and I found my faith. And that's a big thing for many of us in recovery. That spiritual awakening happens. And that kind of led me back to my wife and my kids and eventual reconciliation.
You said that was free. I think that's one of the biggest complaints that we hear about getting out of this cycle of addiction is how do you get to a rehab? How do you afford it? I mean, I've had family members who have invested tens of thousands of dollars in rehab programs. They're so expensive.
Yep, they are. But there's also a ton of free programs. It just depends on what you're looking for. Yeah, you can go to the rehab in Malibu and spend 50 grand if you want. Or you can go to the Salvation Army, which is a little bit harder core, full of accountability and structure, and also find your pathway back. And so look, if you're homeless on the street, living in a tent, trust me, going to an environment where you have to wake up at 6 a.m. and shave and tuck in your shirt and go to church twice a week and follow some 12-step recovery beats the hell out of sleeping in a tent on the street. It just does. And so we need to have multiple options available for people. Private insurance companies need to do a lot better job of paying for drug rehab. That's another topic, really. But we should be doing what we can to make rehabs widely available, treatment on demand, and make it as affordable as possible, if not free altogether, because we have 40 million people in this country struggling with drug addiction right now. 10% of the population of our country is addicted to drugs.
So what do you think is the answer to homelessness? I mean, I know that you feel like you've successfully beat this, and you know that that's not the case for many people in San Francisco. You have a serious homelessness problem out there, and I would say you have some of the highest budgets for homelessness in the country. Between San Francisco and Los Angeles, the budgets are in the hundreds of millions. And yet the homeless problem continues to get worse. So what do you say to politicians about what they can do to get people off the street?
Well, another great question, and there's no one easy answer to it, but I will say this, that accountability is one of the cornerstones of recovery. So Trump's executive order on homelessness was actually the correct approach. That is what we have to do. We're at a point now where we have, in San Francisco, we have 8,000 homeless. At least half of them are living unsheltered on the street. 80 to 90% of them have what they call a co-occurring disorder, which is either addiction or mental illness, or both of them playing out at the same time. And the biggest mistake that we've made in our homeless response as a state and as a nation is that we decided to, first of all, call it homeless, because that's a euphemism, and to downplay the fact that there's a drug problem, that we have a huge drug problem amongst the homeless in this country. And we've downplayed it on purpose because we don't want to stigmatize drug users. We don't want to stigmatize the homeless, all that harm reduction stuff coming from the radical left. That's a huge mistake. It's a terrible mistake because we're misdiagnosing the problem. And to give you an example of that, in LA on Skid Row, they just finished building a couple of towers to house the chronically homeless in supportive housing. Each one of those units in that apartment building cost the city $600,000 per door. Okay. to house about 400 people altogether. Well, guess what? On Skid Row in a 50-block radius, there's 10,000 homeless people. So how much is it going to cost us to house all 10,000 of those homeless people? And then on top of that, we don't ask them to get off drugs. In fact, we tell them it's okay. You can bring your drugs inside with you. How do you?
Yeah, I guess that's the question that I think so many of us have. And it's kind of the question that we don't really ask because I think that nobody understands the answer. The problem is not that you don't have a house. Somehow you got there. I mean, you were not actually someone that didn't have a house. You had a home. You weren't homeless. You weren't in your home because you were choosing. Addiction was choosing for you to be living out on the streets. So
Right.
how many people are in that situation? I guess you're really right. We're calling it homelessness, but is it was your experience that the majority out there of people were actually addicted?
Yes. So everybody that I knew on the street was addicted to drugs. Everybody. And I'm not exaggerating or anything. 100% of the people I knew on the street, old, young, white, black, they were all addicted to drugs, whether it was crack cocaine, methamphetamine, heroin, whatever, they were addicted. Okay. And I just want to be very, very clear about that. And so when you hear all this data come out saying, oh, it's only 45% or 47% of the people that are addicted, these are based on surveys that we've done. And then you start asking about the surveys and it turns out that they're self-reported. So you're basically asking people, hey man, are you using drugs? When they would come up to me on the street when I was homeless and they would say, hey, and I don't even want to say homeless. When I was on the street, they would say, hey, Tom, are you okay? Are you struggling with drug use or you need some help? And I'd be like, what are you talking about? I'm just sitting here minding my business. I'm fine. So are we really getting the truth from people? Of course not, because when you're struggling with addiction, number one, there's denial. Number two, there's fear. And number three, you don't want to admit that you have a problem to anyone because you still think that you have control over your situation, even when it gets down to as little as a piece of heroin in your hand.
I think that's the most shocking part about this for someone who hasn't gone through this. And that's why I'm so grateful to you for sharing your story, because as I listened to this, how quickly it was that this took hold of you. And it was no longer really a choice because that feeling of euphoria that you talk about and wanting that back. I mean, that was so powerful that it took you out of your home, put you on the street. What was that experience like? Are you sleeping on street corners? Like, what does that look like? Give us a little bit of a picture of what that is and who you met and how that was out there alone.
Generally speaking, it was just very dark all the time. Even when the sun was shining and it was warm, everything was a very dark experience. You're cold all the time because more often than not, I would sleep in a doorway, kind of crouched down in a doorway, and I just had a jacket and my jeans. And sleeping on the concrete is very, very cold, and so it just gets to your bones, and you feel cold on the inside all the time. I would eat maybe once a day. I knew where the soup kitchen was. I could go get a meal if I needed to. The rest of the time of my existence on the street was spent trying to hustle to maintain my drug addiction. And that's how the case was with everybody I knew on the street. And I knew people on the street in San Francisco that were from Michigan, Kentucky, Ohio, Las Vegas. I knew a guy that used to be a graphic designer in Las Vegas making six figures in the salary, but he got addicted to oxycodone, and then he became a heroin addict and now is living on the streets of San Francisco. It crosses all barriers, addiction does, and it's amazing that the people you'll meet out there's people out there that have master's degrees. I knew a guy that was an officer in the Navy at one point that had been a heroin addict for 25 years on the street. And so many of them now are gone because illicit fentanyl came to the street.
So at a certain point, was it, I mean, you talked about it at first being like this calming, warm blanket, took away all your troubles. Does it suddenly change? Because what I'm hearing is you're living in horrible conditions to avoid that withdrawal because you know that's coming if you don't keep it up. I mean, does that seem like you're just kind of chasing the drug to stop the inevitable?
You clearly just hit the nail on the head. So at a certain point, this is the last big trick of addiction, is that it's no longer about getting high. It's about staying well, not going into withdrawal. So you're doing everything you can just to maintain. And if you get high, that's a bonus. And there's this huge fear of those withdrawal symptoms because the physical withdrawals from fentanyl are horrible. They're absolutely horrible. It's imagine having like the flu and a cold and anxiety and your muscles are locking up, you're throwing up, all the stuff all at the same time, and it lasts for days upon days upon days. It doesn't ever go away, and you'll literally almost do anything to not fall into that kind of trap of that feeling. So people cheat, they steal, they'll lie, they'll rob their neighbors, they'll sell themselves, they'll do whatever they need to do to get drugs. That's how powerful this addiction is. And so this is another reason why we have to put such a focus on fentanyl, because in addition to fentanyl killing everyone, I want to just make this point really quick. The first time I used that 30 milligrams and I felt that blanket over my head, I never felt that feeling again until the first time I tried fentanyl. That was the only drug I ever used since then that actually made me feel like the first time that I used. And that's why so many people love it. And then it traps you in your addiction. Fentanyl metabolizes faster in your body, so you have to use it every 2 hours, unlike heroin, which was every 6 to 8 hours. Yeah. So, these harm reduction people and the public health people are out there saying, hey, we need to wait for people to be ready here. You're never going to be ready unless we intervene, because you have to use fentanyl every 2 hours in order to just stay well. And that's
I might sound incredibly naive here, but I have always, I guess the public story and the media story has worked a number on me, because I always felt like fentanyl was an accident if you got it, but you were seeking out fentanyl.
Oh, no, it's completely replaced heroin in San Francisco. You can't find heroin on the streets of San Francisco or opioids of any kind. The only thing that they have are fentanyl in powdered form or fentanyl fake pills that look like oxycodone that'll kill you quick. And it's cheap. It's $5 for a little baggie for 1/10 of a gram of fentanyl now on the streets of San Francisco.
Oh my gosh.
You go to Portland, Oregon, the fentanyl pills are $1.50 a pill on the street right now. So this is why it's so pervasive. It's cheap to manufacture, easy to smuggle because dogs can't smell it when it comes across the border. And then the distribution is just become nationwide, like widespread, and it's completely saturated our country and created an overdose calamity of epic proportions.
So that is why when you see him saying we're taking out these ships, you say go for it, because that's the drug that's being sold. I mean, I think so many of us think that that's like I said, you're accidentally getting that, but that's actually just the cheap, high, quick stave off the withdrawal symptoms. You've got this.
Yeah. I mean, look, the cartels made a business decision, right? To replace heroin, which takes time to produce because you have to grow the opium poppies and then you have to harvest them and make it into heroin with something that you can take 3 precursor chemicals that you mostly get from China, mix them together to make fentanyl into a powder, and then you package it and you ship it off. And you can do that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You don't have to wait for seasons and planting and all that stuff to happen, or harvesting. You can just mass produce this stuff. And that's been their cash cow. And now, the cartels were already making billions before. They're making billions more now. And that also speaks to, we need to start asking what's going on in our country that 40 million, that 10% of our population is using drugs. Why is it this way here and not that way pretty much everywhere else?
That's what I was going to ask is, are we the biggest market?
We are the biggest market. So it goes, U.S. is number 1, and then it's Canada. And then fentanyl hasn't arrived in Europe yet. So while they have a huge drug problem in the UK, there's no fentanyl there yet. It hasn't jumped the pond for whatever reason. And it hasn't really hit Australia either, as an example, that also has historically high drug usage rates. It's really just the United States and Canada. North America has been deeply afflicted with fentanyl, but interestingly enough, Mexico doesn't have that same kind of problem. So we have to start asking why that is, and nobody really has a clear answer. It's socioeconomics is part of it. But nobody really has a clear understanding of why we love drugs so much in the United States.
I think it is definitely something that we think is just sneaking into, there's a drug market and then that's sneaking in. When I was running for office, we went to our Oakland County Sheriff's Office, and they have a crime lab there. And I mean, honestly, I would have seen this in someone's house and not known what it was. It's this giant block that it looked like chalk, and it was pressed into the shape of a Jeep logo. And I'll never forget this. And he said that's how they brand it. The different, whoever is selling it, they have these brands and they use logos and they had a Jeep logo in there. And I thought, he said, that's drugs. I said, what do you mean? He said, yeah. And there's a woman in there and she was taking it apart very carefully. She had a hood over top of her that was, vacuuming up all the air. She was a full, almost hazmat suit. It was fentanyl.
Yep, that's right. And she has to wear that hazmat suit so she doesn't overdose herself. So in San Francisco, our fentanyl is multicolored, and it is that chalk substance that you're talking about, that powdered chalk substance. And they color it. There's red fentanyl, blue fentanyl, light blue, yellow, and each one of them designates either a different strength of the fentanyl or that it's mixed with something else, like it's mixed with methamphetamine or mixed with benzodiazepines like Xanax to intensify the effect one way or the other for people. And so it's like a buffet where people, if you have the money, you can pretty much get anything that you want. And the way the cartel dealers view it here is that if you die, you die. You made the decision to put that drug in your body. And what's even more frustrating is that the police here are doing their job. They're arresting the drug dealers. The DA in San Francisco now, our current DA, is doing her job. She is prosecuting drug dealers. But we have a bunch of judges on our superior court benches here that are former public defenders that still have this ideology that the war on drugs failed. So they just continue to release these dealers over and over back to the street, which is why the door has been left open for Trump to threaten federal intervention in San Francisco. That's really the reason why. It's not about undocumented immigration. It's about organized drug dealers on the street that have persisted for more than a decade that are killing 650 people in our city every single year.
I think that is the crazy part about this. You are talking about a few people having a lot of power. And as I hear you saying, you're kind of like a drug runner because you get them free. They are just using their own clients as employees without having to pay them. I mean, it's insane. So if you took the few bad guys off the street, over time, this would end. That's what we're hearing in Michigan. You seem to believe that as well.
Oh, 80% of the homeless drug problem in San Francisco would literally go away if we removed all the organized drug dealers from here. They're the ones that cause the majority of the chaos. They all carry guns. There's drug violence all the time. And we have to be honest, in San Francisco, so there's 4,000 people on the street using drugs, and then there's another several thousand that are actually housed in supportive housing in San Francisco that come out of their house in the day and hang out on the street with the other homeless and use drugs. And then you have another few thousand that are in housing themselves that we're paying for with rent subsidies that cost this city $450 million a year to keep them housed, and they're using drugs inside. And so now we've created the scenario where 70% of all the overdose deaths in San Francisco happen at a fixed address. So we've actually taken this problem and we've also moved it inside. It's not even like we took it off the street and moved it inside. We have it on the street and then we also have it inside at the same time. And it's just a big mess.
And they know who they are, but they're still out there.
Absolutely. Look, every drug dealer in San Francisco has been arrested. In fact, last year, SFPD arrested all the drug dealers in San Francisco. 900 felony drug dealing arrests were made in San Francisco. That's pretty much all the dealers that were here, yet the drug market remains. So you have to start asking why that is, and you have to start looking at the mechanisms that we have in place and then our state policies that are in place that allow these judges to make these decisions that just create a revolving door for organized drug dealers to go back to the street, sell fentanyl that, again, is killing 600 plus people a year in our city.
Oh my gosh. So what are you doing now? And what's your message to people? What's your closing message to the folks today?
I'm doing a variety of different things. I do consulting work. I work for a great company called Sunflower Sober, which is kind of the merger of AI and recovery together. It has an AI virtual sponsor that you can put on your phone to give you support as you're trying to stay sober and trying to stay in recovery. But I also work on public policy. I work in that field now as well, where I'm trying to push, and it's really an uphill battle because it's California, of course. But to anyone who will listen nationwide, I'm trying to push for more pragmatic changes to drug policy so that we shift our focus away from radical harm reduction, free crack pipes, to actually focusing on getting people off the drugs, getting them healthy, and getting them reintegrated back into society so that they can return to work, pay their taxes, reconnect with their families. Those are the kinds of ideals that we need to be fighting for in this country, for this population, before it gets so far out of control that we just have this permanent class of people that are always going to be out there on the street using drugs, destroying themselves, and harming the community.
It's such common sense. I mean, it really is, but it's very hard after years of being told, and this seems crazy. People will go, well, it's not hard. But these communities have been told, you've got to have free crack pipes. You've got to have free syringes. We've got to make this so that it's safe. How can that possibly be safe? Now you have to turn all of that thinking around, which seems like it would be very easy. But I've watched people, I've listened to people on social media. I see regular people who have fallen for this. And that's why I'm so grateful that you told your story and you were so open with what you dealt with and what you saw out there. Because I think that without hearing it from someone who's actually gone through it, we hear from pundits, we hear from people all the time. You don't know it until you've learned it from someone who's actually dealt with it. So Tom, thank you so much for coming on today.
It has really been my pleasure. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to share my story and to let people know that accountability is a cornerstone of recovery. We need to fight for it in this country. Thank you.
Absolutely. Tom Wolf, thank you so much for coming on. And thank you all for joining us on the Tudor Dixon Podcast. For this episode and others, you can go to TudorDixonPodcast.com, the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can watch the whole thing on Rumble or YouTube at Tudor Dixon. Thank you so much. Join us next time and have a blessed day.